that's nice, old-fashioned, good test cricket, solid test cricket from South Africa in spite of losing a wicket straight after tea. And now it's lunch. They've managed to put a nice partnership together, Temba Bavuma, Tristan Stubbs. We look back at that middle session of play of the second test match on Bajaj Finserv Mutual Funds presents ESPNcricinfo Matchday in the company of Saba, Karim and Vernon Philander. And if I could perhaps bring Vernon in first, I'm sure it's a session he'd enjoy, just what the doctor ordered. Love the shirt, Vernon. How good was the batting?
Yeah, I think my assessment of that session, I'd probably say it's a session that was half, on both sides. I think India's done some, obviously some fantastic investment work, and very often you go through test matches like that, where you have to graph and invest. With the ball, I think they haven't let South Africa off the hook, and we've just seen before this lunch break that that ball has started to tail a bit. So there will be definitely something to work with for the Indian team, after the lunch break. But I think wonderful from South Africa again, a smart tactical move in bringing Tristan Stubbs in at number 3. I think he's perhaps the player best equipped to play Kuldeep. I think they perhaps have identified him to be the massive threat, and of course the two of them having played obviously for Delhi together, so he perhaps know a little bit more about facing Kuldeep. So I think a smart move from the South African management to send him up the order and nullify that threat early on in the South African batting innings.
Excellent. Let's take up from there. Would you say that India also wouldn't be too displeased given the scoring was at less than 3 and over in that session?
Well, it shows that India is still in the game. In the session also they tried their best. They rotated their bowlers. One was expecting that from Rishabh Pant. But full marks to South Africa. This was a sedate session for them. But this is what was required. You go back to your constructive way of building an innings, and that's what both Bavuma and Tristan Stubbs did. And I think very good point from Vernon for this promotion of Tristan Stubbs, because both Kuldeep Yadav and Stubbs, they play for the same franchise. They have had numerous encounters, especially during practice sessions, and one can see those exchanges taking place between Tristan Stubbs and Kuldeep Yadav. He was able to use his feet because Tristan Stubbs was picking the ball from the release, and I think that makes a big difference. If you're able to do so, then it's easy to encounter Kuldeep Yadav.
We've seen this vast improvement playing spin in white ball cricket, Tristan Stubbs, especially for a batter from a Sena nation or from South Africa. What do you attribute the reasons for his success against wrist spin even?
Oh, well, using his feet right up the order, Raunak, and I think the ability to read the wrist spinner as soon as the ball comes out of his hand. And I think for that you need loads and loads of practice, and I'm sure Tristan Stubbs has done that. And I think that therein lies the cue. If you're able to pick the wrist spinner from the hand, then it gets easier to play your shots. Otherwise, you're relying basically on maybe one shot, that is a sweep shot as your go-to shot. But if you're able to pick the variations very early, and then you can use good footwork in going down the wicket. Also use the depth of the crease to play it on the one side. So you can actually try and rotate the strike, and I think that's what Tristan Stubbs was trying to do against Kuldeep Yadav. It is a challenge, but I think it is good to see the way Stubbs applied himself.
It's only his 15th test, Vernon, but he has batted at 4, 5 and 6. Didn't bat at 3 in the last test, but that 3 is where he averages nearly 47. Is that the place for Tristan Stubbs permanently, you think?
I think in the long run, you perhaps want to bat him at 3. I think he's had his difficulty against the new ball. When the ball do move around, I think he has been challenged in terms of his technique. I think also from a South African perspective, they perhaps have identified him batting at 5. With the spinners, starting to come into the game, he's going to be challenged technically. So I think perhaps the best place for him to bat is number 3, because normally the surfaces on day 1 and 2 will be pretty good. So once he gets in, he can bowl those long innings where he won't be, challenged in terms of his technique so much. But yeah, I think for South Africa, I'd love to see him bat at 3, because I do feel he has the ability, number 1. But more importantly, I think he has the temperament, to bat long innings. So yeah, hopefully he can really make that spot his own.
Excellent. Right. Well, it's only a 30-odd, but it's hard work, and he'll hope to build from this. Let's get another report on the pitch. We saw 1 or 2 that turned and bounced from Washi. We didn't quite see that in this session, Saba. What does that tell us?
I think there is no moisture now left on the wicket. So I think this was a great track to bat on. I think it will remain so maybe till tomorrow, Raunak, maybe till the lunch session tomorrow. And I think that is why it's so imperative for South African batters to post a big score, because again, on this kind of a track, the first inning makes a big difference between both the sides. But yes, I think it requires some patience, and I think that's what Bavuma and Tristan Stubbs did. You need to absorb the pressure, more so when you lose a wicket immediately after tea. Losing the wicket to Ryan Rickleton, was batted quite well, must have been quite a setback. But for Bavuma and Stubbs to stitch this partnership, they really have to bring in all the faculties into play, which they did so well.
Yeah, that's two very good partnerships. Now, I think credit to South Africa, isn't it, Vernon? 2 Test series, not easy to quickly identify what your approach needs to be. But so far, South Africa have really shown or ticked all the right boxes. You call this session to play out almost in the same way that it's done so far. And South Africa's batters just seem to be well prepared. Is it fair to say?
Yeah, I think I said it before the first Test match. I feel they've had obviously decent preparation. The Test series in Pakistan would have set them up very well coming into this particular contest. South Africa in general, are pretty slow starters when it comes to playing bilateral series. But I do feel obviously with having that preparation and having won the first Test match, they'd have sit down and they'd have asked themselves, what is my best scoring opportunities or what is my best scoring zones? And I think they've certainly made that move by sifting Tristan Stubbs up to the top. So that would have been a hard conversation. How do we take Kuldeep Yadav completely out of the contest? And I'm going to put my best player, the guy who knows him best. So I think from a technical point of view, it's smart play from South Africa. But again, I think India's done a lot of hard work, in that particular session. They've invested well. They haven't let South Africa off the hook. But I think tactics is certainly going to come to play, in this last session. And with that ball starting to reverse, I don't think it's going to be plain sailing, from a South African perspective. I think the scoring rate is going to be tough. And like you guys have mentioned, I do feel that the surface will deteriorate, as the game goes along. So the scoring rates are never going to climb up above 3.5. I can guarantee you that. I think it's perhaps going to get slower, as the tests obviously progress. So it's going to be about batting time. It's going to be about, getting that surface worn out and bring your spinners into play. But you feel that India will have to make a play after this after this lunch break, in order to stay alive in this Test series.
Excellent. I'm going to get more in detail about what plans going into the next session. But quick summation on this session from Rishabh Pant, the captain. Anything they could have done more? Bowling plans, bowling changes? All right for you?
A little bit here and there, Raunak. I expected a longer spell from Kuldeep Yadav after the tea break. 2 overs from him, picked up the wicket of Ryan Rickleton, immediately change of Ravindra Jadeja, and then brought back Kuldeep Yadav. So these things you can expect from Rishabh Pant because he's got his own way of assessing the situation and bringing in the changes, but which is fine. I think he's a young captain, first time ever for him to lead the side. He will take his time to understand the way the game has progressed. But I do feel that this is such an important session coming up now, Raunak.
Yeah.
I think so far what Bavuma and Tristan Stubbs have done is to assess the risk and then figure out the scoring opportunities. So they were extremely constructive and they really applied themselves to that extent. This is kind of expected from the post-lunch session also. But for India, they have tried out Siraj, they have tried out Bumrah, and as Vernon pointed out, the ball has started to tail in.
Sure.
So one can expect short bursts from both the seamers, and this hope that they may be able to pick wickets. But generally, I see the spinners operating again in this session.
Let's get a quick word in on the one wicket that did fall, and you must have been very happy as a keeper yourself to see.
Yes,
was a tough, smart catch?
Yes, it was a very smart catch, and I think he was able to hold on to that one because he had his head in the right position. He was able to follow the line of the ball and covered that line quite well. So although it was a definite edge, but because he was watching the ball closely, he was able to keep his hands at the right place at the right time.
All right, that was Ryan Rickleton dismissed by Kuldeep Yadav very quickly after the first break, which is tea. We're all still struggling with it. Just get stuck when we refer to the breaks here. You saw that from Saba, from Vernon, from me. That's okay. We'll get this right before this test is done. And even if we don't get it right, it's fine. What we must get right these days is pitches, though. And we don't seem to be getting that as often as we should. While we have just come off a heated debate where plenty was said about the Eden Garden surface in Kolkata, we're witnessing the start of the Ashes in Perth, which is running along with this test, where we've had 30 wickets fall in what was 113 overs. I can point out now that the time of this conversation live on our lunchtime show on day 1 is when Travis Head, promoted to open the batting in the 4th innings, has taken Australia to an absolute flyer. He's 50 plus without loss. However, the questions in the minds of the fans, when wickets fall like this and tests inevitably head to 3-day finishes, Are these both tight pitches? What's the difference?
So at the outset, Raunak, the way I look at it is two wrongs don't make a right. So if the wickets are underprepared and bad, whether it is in the Asian subcontinent or even outside Asia, one should be able to define it. And I feel that a true surface is wherein there is no variable bounce in at least the first 2-3 days, and then as the test match progresses, there is a natural deterioration on the surface, which is perfectly fine, and that's the kind of surface you expect, more so especially in Test cricket format. However, the moment you see that there is variable bounce in Asian conditions, variable bounce along with that vicious turn on the first day itself, I term it as an underprepared surface.
Right.
Similarly, when you go outside the Asian subcontinent, if I feel excessive lateral movement, if there is variable bounce, because normally in Sena countries you have pacey wickets, if it is dangerous for the batter, then I think I would term that also as a underprepared surface. So I think that's the call which the respective boards have to make, because on one hand, the respective cricket boards are the biggest stakeholders to drive this format forward, and how you're able to do so by preparing through a surface which encourages the skill aspect of everybody in this game, be it as a batter or a spin bowler or even a pace bowler. That's what we expect going forward in most of the test match venues.
All right, Vernon, weigh in when there is excessive lateral movement, when seam conditions become so conducive that batters find it hard to survive. Is that just nullified because the bounce can be trusted, but the bounce here in India can't be trusted, so one pitch is worse than the other? Weigh in with your experience.
Yeah, I think I've listened to a statement made by Steve Smith recently, where he's actually talking about the surfaces in Australia, that has deteriorated over time. So there is a bit more, obviously, in terms of lateral movement on offer for the seamers. But I also question that, the technical bits, when it comes to batting. I think, as much as, you want to see surfaces to be through, but, there's also the aspect where batters need to equip themselves technically, to survive, certain elements, when the ball is swinging, when the ball is nipping, when the ball is turning. I don't think we see enough investment being made by the batters themselves, in order to get through those tough phases. I think, with the advent of T20 cricket, surfaces are generally so good where, we see it, I think time after time, batters these days go out and they really just trust the hand-eye coordination, and that's almost their method of survival. So when things do get, moments do get tough in a game, we often see batters revert to taking the positive option, and we see a few more shots being played. So, of course, when you're going to play a few more shots on the surface that do offer the bowler something, you're going to put yourself at risk, of obviously losing, your wicket. So I do feel, surfaces has become a little bit tougher overall, and I'm personally speaking from a South African context as well. I think, the last sort of 2-3 years we've seen, the ball moving, obviously, around corners in South Africa itself. But I still ask the question, are batters doing enough to equip themselves technically, to be able to get through those tough phases? I think there's a couple of examples. Kane Williamson, Temba Bavuma, I think Virat Kohli that has just retired. Those are guys who have made a massive investment in their techniques. So very often the technique get them through. So very. Sorry, so very often the
Vernon,
technique
I think you're back now.
through the tough phases.
Yeah.
Sorry, can you guys hear me? So very often the technique gets you through those tough phases. And I think, you need to trust your technique at the end of the day. But, I think, the second part, to my conversation around these surfaces will be around the input of these different boards. If you go out and openly admit that you've asked for a surface, to turn on day one, then you are at fault. I think, at the end of the day, you want to, produce good cricketing surfaces. Yes, you perhaps want to obviously, prepare surfaces to suit your style of play, but to go over the top like we have seen in Calcutta, that's a bit uncalled for.
Anything to add, Saba?
Yes, I think a couple of things here. For instance, what have we noticed today in Guwahati? The ball is turning, but there is no variable bounce. It is not that the ball is keeping low. So the batsman can trust the bounce and play accordingly. That's when technique comes into the picture. That's why Vernon talked about batters like Virat Kohli and Kane Williamson, Bavuma for that matter, or the way Tristan Stubbs have played today. Similarly, when you travel abroad, you find those kind of surfaces where you have good technique. You can negotiate the no ball, the new ball. But I think a true surface is also one that offers assistance to the pace bowlers and Indian conditions, maybe spinners on the first day, till the second day, then the wicket plays better, and then you should deteriorate naturally on the fourth and the fifth day. That's what you find on a true wicket, and I think that's what you expect, whether you're playing at home in India or even outside the Asian subcontinent.
So might I bring in the perception here, and perhaps the way fans and viewers tend to react to watching cricket in different parts of the world and therefore surfaces, whether there is a perception problem too, that if a wicket spins on day one, that's unplayable. The bounce factor is well taken, and I want both of you to weigh in on this, but excessive seam, even though the bounce may be true, looks at times almost as impossible to deal with. So is excessive seam just as bad as excessive spin?
Yes, to a large extent, Raunak, because excessive seam movement also brings the focus on the batters to survive, and you wouldn't want that kind of a surface. Similarly to subcontinent wickets where the ball tends to turn so much. But I think I have more issues with the variable bounce, and I think with the variable bounce, however good technique you have, it still at times gets very difficult to play on those kind of wickets. But as I said, I would define a true wicket which as the day progresses or as the test match progresses becomes better, then again it deteriorates on the fourth and the fifth day.
Vernon, same question?
I think I have to second, sentiments here there, because I mean, I've played on surfaces, that does go around corners, so I won't be throwing the seam bowlers under the bus here. But I feel as a batter, I think if you can trust the bounce, you can leave a ball on good length. I think, the problem comes, like you said, when there's invariable bounce, the ball keep low and you can't trust the bounce. So again, I mean, it's a bit of a muchness for me. I think excessive seam movement is probably right on par with excessive turn. But at the end of the day, if you can trust the surface, you're still allowing players to score. I think also, and I'm making reference to this particular SS game that's that's on the go at the moment. I think both set of teams, have gone with the attitude of, we're going to take the game on. So they're playing an expensive brand of cricket. So, as much as we would like to, and as much as we're criticizing the service at the moment, they are playing a high brand of cricket. So with that comes the element of risk. And of course, you can you can lose wickets in clusters, when you play, that kind of high percentage cricket. So again, I just like to see, these surfaces and boards and teams stay out of, the way of the curators and let them prepare a surface. I mean, whichever way the game is going to go from there onwards, so be it. But I just think there's far too much input from boards, from teams, and almost taking the curators, job out of player. By requiring certain surfaces to favor the home team.
All right, I want to get into that aspect where you speak of, Vernon, because I have these discussions a lot, say in the office or even with colleagues within cricket, who at times are guilty of the generation they grew up watching cricket in, right? You look at how Steve Smith got out in the first innings, and you try and see him playing a ball, which is somewhere over here on the chest, where the batters of, say, 20 years ago would have immediately instinctively dropped their hands, because that ball's not going to harm you if you don't play it. Trust, leave on length. And whether, with Vernon's point, that batters are choosing this brand of cricket, well, that is the optimum skill in the world now, right? Those are the batters you have. And I've seen that the other extreme then is England put out the roads they do, because then that suits baseball. No complaints, because you got 5 days of outstanding test cricket, which we just saw with the India-England series. So is there a point here of perhaps because the psychology of batting has changed, batters do not grind it out, graft it out, they will take it on, that the pitches must also accordingly change to suit what is the current optimum level of skill, if you know where I'm coming from?
Well, Raunak, it is a challenging environment because gone are those days where batters grew up preparing for test match or for first class cricket. Now young batters prepare for all three formats.
Yes.
So it is very difficult to adapt, and only some special players are able to do so. We have talked about 3-4 players in this generation who can adapt to all three formats, but it does not come easy. You're always one format in terms of batting skill takes over the other format, which is good in a way. I mean, no wonder we are seeing the results now that takes place in Test cricket. But it also means that for batters, it becomes so difficult to adapt to different environment. To find the right balance is not so easy. So that is why, for instance, you talked about England
flat pitches,
on
batting
preparing flat wickets, and because their batting suits that kind of mentality. But that's the challenge when they go outside Australia. Why is it that England has suffered so much in the first Test match? Because that kind of batting skill is not so conducive on wickets which is favouring seam bowlers. Also, the same thing happened to them when they travelled to India. So I think that is why the role of a batter, the role of the team management and the selectors comes into the picture really in a big way, to find the right kind of combination so that they're able to play well in different conditions or different environment.
Vernon, please jump in as well. And I'll just add one more thing. I'm not sort of defending a bad surface or attacking a surface. Maybe these two Test matches we've witnessed or we're witnessing are extreme examples. But you know what I'm trying to say here? It certainly seems to be the opinion of a number of players and pundits that today batters don't necessarily, even if there's a little bit for the bowlers, they don't necessarily have the same effect in surviving as, say, batters from a generation gone by. However, should the game sort of custom or tailor itself to the skill of the batters that are playing international cricket?
Well, I love this conversation, and one being, you are going to face different conditions as a batter. I think at the moment we are so critical, when it comes to, the surfaces being prepared. I think when you travel to South Africa, Australia per se, the ball's going to bounce. So I think one of the biggest arts of playing in, those kind of conditions is to drop the hands. It's an art to survive against the new ball. I think we also need to make a good reference point here that batters also need to start respecting a new ball for what it is. I think, we've become so accustomed to, guys playing in the white ball format. And in the white ball formats, we see the bat dominating more often than not. So when you are up against, a surface that, do provide the bowler something, it's an art to get through that difficult phase. You need to show some respect for that new ball. You need to force bowlers to come back, into their third and fourth spells. And therein lies the opportunity to score. And I think as cricket lovers, as pundits, we've become so accustomed to, batters dominating proceedings. So I'm all for, there being a little bit of assistance for the bowlers from time to time. But I think it's batters that will have to up the way of thinking. I think, when conditions are a little bit, against the batters, I just feel batters these days throwing the towel too quickly. I'm going to take the option of being positive and almost hide behind it. I think, it's become a hiding mechanism, for batters to say, oh, you know what, I've lost my wicket, but I've actually taken the soft option as a batter. I think, if you go and analyze some of those wickets we've seen in the first Test match, I mean, it's a high risk shot to go across the line, but I'm going to hide behind the fact that, it's the easy way out or the easy option out. So I'd love players, to step up a little bit and say, you know what, yes, it has been a tough surface, but let's take, the innings that Temba Bavuma played. I mean, wasn't it the same surface he batted on, wasn't it the same surface he batted on and KL Rahul in the first innings as well? You just need to grind a little bit, guts it out a little bit, and very much Test cricket boils down to gutting it out more often than not. So yes, I mean, we'd love to see, the wonderful 500, 600s being a day and a bit, but ultimately when the surface are against you, you need to, you need to tough it out a bit as well.
Just to accentuate Vernon's point here, Raunak, I also feel that the art of defending, the art of leaving, that needs to resurface again. And I think the exceptional players at this level also, and they still understand the value of defending and the value of leaving the ball, more so when you're playing against good quality seam bowler. And I think that to some extent is lacking now. And I think for the next generation coming through, in Test cricket especially, that is so important. And I think we saw that in the first Test match at Eden Gardens, even here in Perth Test match. All such batters who are able to defend well, can absorb the pressure, can grind, and then they can score runs. And I think that ability you need to nurture now in the young batters who are coming through the system.
Okay, well, fascinating conversation with both Vernon and Saba. And I just point out now, while that conversation was going on, Travis Head has smashed his way to 50 of 38 on the unplayable seeming deck at Perth with 3 4s and 3 6s. I'm not watching that game, following it on Cricinfo, but just letting you know, that's the way he's choosing to grind it out. I completely take your point, but you could see what Australia, how they've reacted. They've just sent Travis Head with a cannon in his hand and asked him to fire big. It's working as of now. The Perth surface, though, we must point out, many times, poor curator would say we would have just taken it to day 3 and 4.
Yeah.
It does flatten out. It gets better. We saw that when India were there at the Border Gavaskar Trophy last year. Right, lovely discussion, gentlemen. I just hope I've not left anything in the tank. Anything to add from either of you?
One quick point here.
Please.
Excessive sea movement, especially on grassy surfaces, that remains maybe even the first couple of days. But after that, it becomes a paradise for batters.
Yes.
It doesn't happen on vicious turners. As the test match progresses, it worsens. It becomes increasingly difficult for the batter to cope with that kind of turn and variable bounce. So that's one more point in favor of truer surfaces.
Okay, very good. Vernon?
I'm going to rest my case because I think whatever I've just said about being a little bit more technical, a little bit more defensive, just got taken out of the equation by Travis Head. His approach his innings down.
In your defense, I will certainly say.
But maybe the wicket has become better now.
You do not get Travis Heads too often. So
yeah.
might be good advice for most people to follow what Vernon Philander has said. If you think you're Travis Head, by all means, go ahead. Right, fascinating. Thank you very much, gentlemen. Just to pivot back to the test match at hand, Vernon says this is likely to be a slow grafter grinder. We might not see the pace with which we expect the game to move after the last test in this one. What's India's best chance to try and break the game open? Do they need to make the play, as Vernon said?
Yes, they need to pick a couple of wickets at least in this session. And I think all that can happen if you're able to operate with a spinner from one end. Again, I think that we may see some short bursts from both the pace bowlers. Hopefully, if India is able to pick up 2 wickets, then I think they can remain alive in this session. One should not even talk about what may transpire tomorrow, but I think for today, the next couple of hours are so crucial for India.
You see Siraj over Bumrah perhaps if the ball starts tailing? He seems to be better.
Yes, I think that's what we have seen so far in this test series. Even before that, I think Siraj looks to be a better exponent of the ball that tails in. So you can see maybe a couple of overs from Siraj.
Yeah, Vernon, plans for both teams, final session.
Yeah, I mean, having been out there, having put in the graph myself, you almost expect India to bounce back a little bit in this last session. I feel they're probably going to pick up 3 wickets towards the back end. But I do feel South Africa are going to bet themselves into a commanding position. So perhaps 90 to 100 runs coming up in this session.
Right.
But I do feel they will lose a couple of wickets along the way.
Well, a 250 for 4 or a 250 for 5 would be a fascinating first day's play. And remember, the light fades quickly at Guwahati this time of year. So let's see where the game stands. Vernon Philander, thank you so much for your time and your thoughts. Saba, Karim, you as well.
Thank you.
And we will look forward to your company for our post-day analysis whenever time is called or stumps is called on day 1. So join us then on Bajaj Finserv Mutual Funds presents ESPNcricinfo Matchday.